Welcome to IlliniGuys.com. We are hosting the Eye on the Illini live. It's Brad, it's Ked, it's myself, Mike Cagley. And guys, we're going to talk about something today that's probably going to get some people annoyed at us. And I think we're going to see some differences in age groups and things like that we'll see here. We're going to talk about the top 5 Illinois point guards that we can remember. Okay. So, folks, if your grandfather played for the Whiz Kids, none of us was alive. We're not saying he wasn't good. We're not saying that he could have been the best of all time, but we're just going the ones that we can actually remember. So now that part gets a little hazy because of our age, but at least we can say that's how we're going to go with this. How did you organize your thoughts when you're trying to rank these 5 guys? Any criteria that you were thinking of or how you looked at this?
Yeah, for me, Mike, I'll be honest with you, and Brad. I looked at history, what they did. I'm not big on. A lot of people are big on wins and losses. I'm not, because I'll give an example. We're doing point guards, but one of the most successful players in college basketball in the Big Ten is Deion Thomas. He never really won anything because his teams didn't win. You asked us who the top 5 point guards were. We gave our top 5. I looked at how they dominated the game, how they scored, not even necessarily, this sounds bad, they made everybody else better. That's a cliche that I don't really like, but I just looked at how they dominated. And some of the guys, I went back to high school because I saw them play in high school, and I remember what they did in high school and how they dominated once they got to college. So for me, it was just more or less what they did, the era, and how they helped Illinois, even when Illinois was winning and when they weren't winning.
Brad, how did you look at this when you were trying to figure out how you're going to rank these guys?
It's always tough. I think the biggest thing is winning for me. You have to be on a winning team for it to be the best, right? And because if you're a great point guard, usually your team wins. And so that was my first thing. Obviously, we can talk stats and assists but I think some guys impact the game differently too. You know what I mean? Some guys just have a greater impact on what happens on the court. And so that's kind of that's my criteria.
Yeah, and we also have he couldn't make it tonight, but we also have Larry's top 5 as well. And
Yeah, I
so
haven't seen
he
Larry's.
was
That would be interesting. So
yeah, you're going to see him. And he was basically one of the things he looked at was how many guys, where were they ranked all conference and that type of thing. So he's got his picks together. And so we're going to take a little look at the top 5 guys for Illinois in terms of point guards. Let's take a little look here. And of course, we're going to again Illini guys' lifetimes. So again, folks, you want somebody from the 40s or 50s. I think I'm the oldest one here, and I didn't get here till 67. And really, Eddie Johnson was probably the first Illini great that I can remember crystal clear all through his career. So just as a rough thing. So let's take a look at who we had as the number 5 Fighting Illini top 5 point guard. So across the board there, Brad had D Brown. I think, Brad, I don't know about you, but I don't know that there was ever been a more electrifying player at getting the fans, whether they were live on TV or even buying magazines. Was there a more electrifying Illini than D Brown?
no, and it's actually weird that he could be fifth on this list when you consider he was Big Ten Player of the Year. He won the Bob Cousy Award. He was a first team All American, and he's fifth on the list. So his accolades may be greater than other guys who are going to be ranked ahead of him on this list by myself included. And yeah, he was really impressive. But I think there are probably 7 or 8 guys you could easily put on this list, and I don't think anybody could really argue, although they will.
Yeah, yeah. And when I looked at it, the other thing that jumped out at me is Larry had Bruce Douglas at number 5. And I got to be honest with you, I'm a huge Bruce Douglas fan. So I thought that was a little low. Ted, you had Io at number 5. Now, how did he end up down at number 5 for you?
Io had a great career at the University of Illinois. And because he came when a time when it wasn't cool to come to Illinois, I didn't let that sway my decision. Though it was tough putting him at number 5, The only reason I say that is because I remember there was a stretch, I was putting it on Twitter, where he had so many game-winning baskets. It was tough for me. He was doing that confusion thing in his arm, and he helped Brad Underwood. If there was one player that you could look at, we talked about this before with Kofi and Terrence Shannon, but Io was the guy that kind of got them going. But he wasn't a great scorer to me. He was just good in clutch. And he did win games. Brad, that was a factor for Brad that was important. And he is in the NBA. He's having a very good, successful season. This is not about the NBA, however. It's about Illini point guards. But I'd have to put him at number 5, like I said, just because he had all those clutch baskets. You have to make the list, without a doubt. But if you look at records, I don't see him, unless I'm missing something, I don't see him dominating in that statistical category.
I was torn because when we do our 2 guards, there's some of these guys who could be almost interchangeable. And I almost thought because of D Brown having Darren around, I almost thought D was almost like a 2 guard sometimes. And Io was a point guard, but he's not your classic dribble up the court, watch to start the offense. He's dribble up the court and score. So I did struggle where to put Io because, as you guys know, I put him on my Mount Rushmore of Illini basketball players because I do think he was the Pied Piper or that brought people back to Illinois. So I have all the respect in the world for him. Didn't know exactly where to put him. That was a tough one.
Yep.
And Larry,
I was good. I was really good, as we're going to see.
yeah,
I think he's pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, you look, Brad, you kind of hit on it. These guys here, any one of these 3 guys that we have down here at number 5, a Big Ten coach would happily take and build a team around them. There's nothing bad about this. So now we got the number 4 one. And Brad, you got Io up there. And now there's one surprise here for me. I love Derek Harper. Derek Harper, of course, like Bruce Douglas, has been on the Illini. We'd love to have Io or D on any day of the week. I liked Derek Harper, and I thought Larry had him lower than what I would have had.
I
agree
was.
with that. I think, as you see, I'm going to have him higher. Yeah. I think he's, I think Derek Harper was one of the, and here's the thing. If you didn't, a lot of people that probably watching this or interacting probably didn't see Derek Harper play much, but he was the guy when I was just starting on. When he was in the 1980, 81, whatever it was, recruiting class, 82, the dude could play, man. He was so good. He was just so
Remember,
good.
he and Doc Rivers were the 2 best point guards in the country. And
Great player.
that's Doc Rivers, who's the NBA coach. So, yes, we are old.
Yes.
we just don't get back to the whiz kids.
You guys have Bruce Douglas, who I think is, I don't have him on my list because I had him 5 or 6. I could have put him anywhere. Doesn't mean I don't think he was great. One guy had to not make the list.
Right. No, and I love Bruce. I think his leadership skills when he was on the Illini, you see a guy who not only was a fantastic player, but he leads teams of individuals now as an adult. It has been a wonderful role model for his family and for people around him. Guy is a quintessential leader, probably doesn't have the offense of the other guys on this list, I guess, from a scoring standpoint.
I'm going to be honest, for me, Brad mentioned somebody has to be off the list. I do remember Derek Harper. He didn't make my list, and I'm not going to lie to you. He really didn't. Great player. I remember watching him play. Brad mentioned something about when he was being younger. I remember he was such a good player. When Illinois was done playing, I would go outside in the yard. He had a different jump shot. I would try to stimulate his jump shot, which I shouldn't have because it wasn't good, but it was effective for him. But I tried it. I'm going to tell you why Bruce Douglas made the list for me. For 20 years, close to 20 years, he was the only guy in the Big Ten who led the Big Ten in steals and assists. I think Mateen Cleaves eventually broke it. That guy deserves to be on that list. I remember watching him in high school, and I was in high school. I was in 8th grade, and I remember coming up to Rock Island Fieldhouse and watching him play for Quincy. And then the very next year, I saw him play on TV. I fell in love with him. But it's hard to leave a guy off. that not just Illinois records, but Big Ten standards. And I don't know, his steals and assist records, they were outstanding. For me, he had to be on the list, and he could defend, and he made other people better. If that's part of the category that people like, he was good at that. He could defend. He had long arms, and he was just a tough Illinois basketball player to me.
And I look at Bruce, and of course, you can't think of Bruce Douglas without thinking of Ephraim Winters. And those alley oops, and rest in peace, Ephraim, but those alley oops were just amazing. And the other thing I think that people forget about Bruce was he could rebound as good as anybody, because in high school, his senior year, after Michael Payne had left, he was the point center for those Quincy teams. And he would go down and guard the biggest guy on the other team. And because of his strength and mental attitude, he was tougher than nails, even when he was being forced to play parts of the game woefully out of position. And I thought he used that rebounding skills in the Big Ten also. So then we go to number 3. And this is where we start seeing a little bit of differentiation. Brad, you got Frank there. What did you see about Frank that made you rank him so highly?
I just love Frank. He was just he was dominant. I think he was a Big Ten Player of the Year in 2001. I just feel like he was great. I think he was a guy who could dominate a game. Now I know there were times when he didn't maybe have the same effort as others. I think that was the thing about Frank, is sometimes he didn't look like he was giving. But I think a lot of times he just didn't look like he was going hard. It's just the way he played. But I think I would say Frank is just he was such a dominant player at Illinois. 2001 Big Ten Player of the Year, one game, Elite Eight, just great player. I think he fits there, and when he wanted to defend, he was like one of the leaders in steals in the Big Ten. Ked was talking about that, great defense, and yeah, I'm a big Frank fan. Loved watching him play.
Now, Ked, you got the guy who, I got to be honest with you, Kejuan Garris is the forgotten Illini, because he was stuck in the post right after the probation. He was a guy that put up really some unbelievable numbers on some teams. He averaged almost 20 points a game, but on some teams that just didn't have the talent level that these other guys had the privilege of playing on. So tell us a little bit about your reasoning for putting Kejuan on there, because I think a lot of people, you need to go back and take a look at what he did, because he was a very talented player that people forget about.
To me, this should be a no-brainer, because who is the school's second leading scorer in the history of the school? I believe it's Kejuan Garris, correct?
Kejuan Garris.
Okay. He was the first player in the Big Ten as a freshman to score 30 points back-to-back games. The kid could play. He was in an era where a lot of people don't know about it. Kejuan put up unbelievable numbers. I remember there was a kid at Iowa named Andre Woodridge. If you guys probably remember him and Deion would go at it head-to-head. Kejuan's a guard. Like I said, if you look at it, we all talk about Deion, and it's easy to forget that Garris's numbers were outstanding. And you mentioned it. You mentioned how well he was, his scoring average, and I don't know what he ended up with. But for me, just to overlook a guy like that, and I could be wrong, be the only guy to have him on the list, which to me, I don't know how you can have a point guard and he's a second league school, and not make a list.
I'll defend my selection there.
Sure.
Kejuan was a great player, no question. But at the same time, his numbers are great. I don't think was he ever first team All Big Ten? I don't think in his career. Was he?
So remember this for me, though, Brad. I'll cut you off. For me, I don't care about wins and losses. For me, a lot of people do. I preface that with Deion Thomas in the beginning. Deion Thomas played against great people, but I don't think he was first team All Big Ten ever either. But that's just for me. Now, a lot of people like that, but I can't penalize a kid because his teams didn't win or he didn't win. And I think you might be right. I don't think he was first team All Big Ten, but he put up some unbelievable numbers. I can't punish him, me personally, because of that. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, I just think, so I look at these other guys who were Big Ten Player of the Year, who were All-American, first team All-Americans. where would, and I look at it, that was back in an era when he played 4 years too. What did I look at, what would Io have put up if he had played another year, scoring 20? His numbers would be insane. I don't know. I think he's a great player, but that's why I didn't have him on the list. And the other thing I thought about, Illinois wasn't necessarily a great team during that time period. And I know it was a tough time. They're going through coming off of the probation and stuff early on there. And so I don't know, you look at maybe his, and also NBA career wasn't what some of these other guys were even. Yeah, but I understand why you would have him on there though, especially his senior year. I thought his senior year, he was good the other years. You mentioned the freshman year, but I thought his senior year, he was great. He really was great. He had a great year shooting the basketball. I thought he had a great year. Got the line. I think he had 250 something free throw attempts and 180 assists his senior year. So he was a fantastic player.
Yeah, he was one that I didn't put on the list, but certainly thought about. Of course, his son we would catch up to him occasionally on the recruiting trail with his son. A heck of a player. I didn't put him there, but I certainly had some consternation about leaving him off. But again, when you're getting a top 5 of a program as good as Illinois, there's some great players that'll be left off, and that's the sad part. So let's move up to see who we have at number 2. And then we see Derek Harper making his appearance there with Brad all the way at number 2. Larry had D Brown. Now we have people asking why he put D Will at 3. And Larry you can figure out who his number 1 is, but I wasn't going to go against 2 guys who were Big Ten Player of the Year. So you can get a little idea who he might have coming in at number 1. I had Darren Williams there. I think Darren's spectacular. And as Brad said, had Darren played his senior year, wow, that would have been something to watch, would have been spectacular. We could say the same thing about Io, say the same thing about Nick Anderson staying another year. There's plenty of guys, had they stayed another year, we would have been treated to some pretty incredible stuff.
NIL back then.
Yeah, I know. We just needed some NIL. And certainly Derek Harper, I have a ton of respect for him. I thought he was a guy that everybody had to game plan against. And D Brown, people are going to be crazy when they see mine, but D Brown didn't make my top 5. I still look at him as a little bit of a lead guard more than a point guard, so maybe I judged him unfairly.
I think it's fair. I understand why you wouldn't have him on there, because the reality was he probably did. His senior year is obviously point guard. He won the Cousy Award.
Right.
But he was, the thing that makes him different, I think, is D was Big Ten Player of the Year as a junior, obviously on the best team. That's why D and Darren, I think, make this list, because that's the best team, most successful team. We can say that other teams would have beaten them or not beaten them or whatever, but that's the most successful team in Illinois history. The interesting thing about this, we talk point guards, if we start talking wings, we're going to talk about the 89 team. How many guys from the 89 team would be on that list? You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? But you could conceivably, honestly, if you just go by 1 year, you could conceivably put Luther Head on this list when they talked about the 3-point guard. Just do the one season, where I know he wasn't really a point guard. The 3-headed monster was special. But when you talk about wings, you have Gill and Anderson battle. Shoot, you could put all those guys on there.
Exactly.
So it's just, a lot of it's subjective. These are all great players. There's no question.
Yeah, and certainly there's going to be people who disagree with us, and that's fine. We're all either married or been married, so we're used to being disagreed with.
I just admit I'm wrong. It works better.
Exactly.
Well,
save time.
I'm going to say why Darren made second for me.
Okay.
Darren was, again, I focus on what you said, college. Darren was a better professional player. Arguably, we could go back, but he probably had the most successful career out of all the players, not just point guards. But when he was at Illinois, you had guys like D Brown, and I'm sorry he didn't make my list. He was more flashy than Darren. Luther, because he could shoot it. Darren was just good, outstanding in college, and he didn't put up great numbers. And I guess I'd have to admit he was underrated. But I know if he wasn't on that team, they wouldn't have won 29 games in a row and went to the championship game. I understand how important he is, and the older he got, the better he got. He also played 3 years. He didn't stay 4 years. Was it 3 years? Yes, I believe it was 3 years. He stayed, and I tried my hardest and I focused on the NBA like a part, but I can't be blind to it. The guy was successful, and he helped Illinois win. And Illinois was lucky to get him. There's so many other schools that he could have went to, and the recruiting just fell right into Illinois' lap. But he should have made everybody's list no matter what.
And we got to say, Bracy Wright was the 5-star that everybody was there to watch, and Darren ended up being the other guy that Illinois liked better. And boy, am I thankful it worked out that way.
Yeah, when Bracy McDonald, he was a McDonald's All-American, I believe. I think he was, and I don't think he played in the NBA. And we obviously know Darren had a better career.
Yeah, and you also look at, as we see who we are going to anoint number one. Brad had Darren, and Larry had another Big Ten Player of the Year, Frank Williams.
Oh my God, Larry.
Frank. Yep, and then I went with Derek Harper. So I think if you had a college team and you told the coach that you get one of those 3 guys for your point guard, there are very few coaches who are going to be upset.
Correct.
That's just the way it goes. Now, I liked Harper's athleticism. He could play great defense. And if you want to hear some great how good Derek Harper stories are, Craig Swope, the All-American safety for the Illini, grew up in that same West Palm Beach area, and they played against Derek Harper in high school. And he talks about some of Derek's feats when Derek was asked to just score as he was in high school. And of course, with Lou Henson was a big one on team play, and Derek didn't get used in that same fashion at Illinois. But Derek also had a career that was very long and probably not far off of Darren Williams. And I think probably you give Darren maybe a slight edge in his NBA career. And I think the only person that we might give over Darren a little bit higher would be Eddie Johnson. And that might be it for Eddie. Might be the best of the Illini in the NBA. But Brad, talk a little bit about your pick for Darren as the number 1 point guard in Illinois history.
Yeah, and Ken mentioned this earlier. It's hard to not talk about a guy who wins a gold medal and a guy who was NBA All-Star and a guy who is max contract guy in the NBA. Just Darren was great. His time at Utah, he was just a fantastic player. So I think that does weigh on this. But also, he was the leader. I know D was the spiritual, kind of emotional leader. But Darren was the guy who made things run on that 2005 team, which is one of the best offenses in college basketball history from an efficiency standpoint. They were fantastic. And they used the 3-point line. They got open looks. It didn't matter what they were running. They were effective. So I think that he was just fantastic in that regard. I think he's a great player. I also think there were times when he was the defensive stopper as well on that same group. Even though he didn't get D was defensive player of the year. We know Luther was a great defender. James, great defender, but he was the guy who many times had the task of guarding the best player on the other team all that time. So that's why I have him. But again, you start looking at those guys, whether it's Frank, whether it's Derek Harper, whether it's D, whether it's Io, Bruce Douglas, Kawan Garris, go down the list. There's so many guys you can put on this list that would fit. But for me, Darren was I think he was the best guy, the greatest point guard.
Ked, what about Frank? I know he could light it up on offense like few could.
I remember, this is college, but I remember in high school, I followed that kid to Milwaukee, to Indiana, because Peoria Manual was just great. And I remember in Milwaukee, I forget who the team was, and they were nationally ranked teams. They had 3 people trying to guard him. 3 people. When he came across half court, he had to get rid of the basketball. Frank, to me, was the most laid-back player, but if there was any kid that ever played basketball at the University of Illinois that could get a shot, it didn't matter who was guarding him. He was able to do it. He could get to the rim. He could finish. He was a good passer. There's a highlight reel that I know all the people are listening to this podcast right now, and I know you guys have seen it. his highlight reel at Illinois is just truly amazing. Frank was underrated because he didn't show emotion, but just he had no weaknesses in his game other than he didn't smile because he could pass. He was just tough. Could shoot the ball. I remember the shot against Minnesota, how he hung in the air that we've all seen before. He made it look really easy. And I know we're talking about Frank, but that's probably why his son struggled because he was never going to live up to that height. Frank was dominant. And that's why Larry, I'm assuming why he put him on the list as well. I just know how, no disrespect to Derek Harper or Darren Williams, and Frank won. For those people that it mattered, but I would love to know weakness in his game. And again, get off once we get done with this podcast. Google Frank Williams highlights at Illinois, and then you'll see why he was number one for me because I just knew when this kid got to Illinois, I knew he was going to be special, and he did not disappoint.
Yeah, he was a great one. I've talked about why I picked Derek Harper, and again, you're looking at the. Now, I will say one thing: was it Dimitri's senior year that at like the first half of the season he was like a mid-year All-American, and I wonder had he
Till Bruce, I remember Bruce Weber saying he went home over Christmas and he came back and he was out of shape because he ate too much Christmas dinner or turkey or whatever.
Yeah, that was it. But I tell you, Dimitri for that first half of the season played as good as anybody, and then he hit the cheeseburger wall.
He was a guy I feel bad about leaving off. He and D. Brown were two guys. Dimitri was good, man. I feel bad.
Michi was a great player too. I think the one thing about Michi, if you look at all these guys, the one difference between him, he wasn't defensively. He wouldn't stack up with most of these guys. You know what I mean? He didn't. Not that he didn't try. I mean, just wasn't the same level, maybe.
Yeah, and I think the amazing thing about Frank was, as you said, he was a little up and down at times, and to win the Big Ten Player of the Year when he did have some games or some halves that you're like, whoa, is he there? I think that shows you how dominant he was when he had it all going because he was tough as nails. Yeah, Dimitri had moments, and he wasn't on as good of teams. Kawan had moments. Were there any other point guards that you thought about beyond these guys that we've mentioned? Because I don't know if there's anybody else I had any heartaches on.
Not that I mentioned, but I do. No matter what, it's hard because like we see our chat, Dimitri did have a successful career, and we all left off a player that probably could have made it. But these were the group that we all pretty much have here. They dominated their era. You can, like Brad mentioned, you can justify every single one of these, and it depends on what you like personally. I can't speak for you guys, but like for me, I like that pizzazz look, and that's why Frank was there for me. Kiwans, I like guys that could just score. While Io was a good player, it was not a great score, he was just good, which is probably why he made fifth. If I feel bad about anybody, it's probably D Brown. He's the one guy that I probably feel bad about. But on the flip side of it, who do I take off?
Yeah, and we got somebody saying, what about Trent Frazier?
I thought about him, but was he really a point guard, or did I miss that? Because I thought about that. I did think about him, Mike.
He's one that we could rank when we do the two guards, the off guards, the wing guard.
Trent is the. We always talk about baseball. We got the Hall of Fame where you're supposed to have great. Trent would be in the Hall of Very Good. And that's not a bad thing. Yeah. That's not a dig. It means you're very good. You just weren't maybe at that elite level. Although some of the guys in the Hall of Fame probably don't remember in baseball don't belong there. But no, I think when I look back in my lifetime, say what you want, and I know he ruffles feathers occasionally. Steve Bardo was awfully good for Illinois as well. I thought he had a great run. I think one of the guys who maybe didn't have the best Illinois career, but the guy who I was most excited to watch coming in early on was like Larry Smith. You remember Larry Smith? Not Larry Smith from our show, but Larry Smith from Alton.
Yes.
Amazing high school point guard. To have him coming off the bench was pretty impressive, right? So I thought those guys, but I think Bardo could be on. You could put Steve Bardo on this list. He had those last 2 years, 89, 90. Whew, he was so good. And I know.
And defensively, nobody. As good as these guys were, I don't know anybody was as good as
Bardo was fantastic. He's a great player. Steve was at the point guard. Was he a guy who was going to be like your best scorer, all that stuff? No. when you put him with Nick Anderson and Kendall Gill, he was a great fit. You know what I mean? Just Kenny Battle, Nick Anderson, Kendall Gill. Steve Bardo didn't need to score to make an impact on a game. And then I don't know. I thought there were some other guys, and the guy who I thought may have had during that time period after Quan Garris left. Remember when Illinois won the Big Ten in 97, 98 with the Kruger's bunch? Remember that crew? Yeah. You remember who the point guard was there?
Was it Matt Hellman?
Matt Heldman. I thought he had a great year. I'm not saying he should be on this list, but I shout out to him, Otis. He was just tough.
I think of one guy who, after his freshman year, I thought might have been able to make a run at this list, but he never made it. Of course, that was Andre Curbelo, who had that incredible first year, and then
Kasparis, Jonas. Oh no,
yeah. Well, but Kasparis thought, look, I know
if he had stayed another year or two, if he stayed there a year, we might be talking about him on this list. I mean, that's how he's a first round draft pick after 1 year. I mean, it's hard to be a one and done and be on the top 5 point guards.
Not without a national title or something.
Final Four national title type thing, maybe.
So now we have to see who actually won when we force rank these guys. But we had a tie. Darren and Frank tied. Derek Harper ends up being number 3, and then Bruce and D tied for the 5th.
So how do we break that? Do we let our fans break that tie?
No, we'd have to have the fans vote. Do you like Darren or Frank? But I took the easy way out, and I basically said when you add the points up, 5 down to 1 for where you placed, it turned out that Darren and Frank ended up tied. Harper got 3, and Mr. Douglas and D Brown tied, and then Io and some others. So I've been trying to get Io on here for 4 years, so I probably we just sunk any chance I have of getting Io on the show. He's gonna be like, yeah, you want me on your Mount Rushmore, but I can't even crack your top 5. Come on, guys. Darren and Frank, that would be a fun game of one-on-one to see who wins that.
I wonder who would win that, though. That's a good question. What do you think, Brad? Who would win that?
Who we talking about? Who's playing?
Darren Williams and Frank Williams one-on-one, the Williams squad. I think Frank has too much juice for Darren. Darren's bigger, though, stronger, but I think Frank has too much wiggle to him.
Man, I don't know. I don't know. That's a tough one. It'd be a great game. Game one-on-one. It depends whether Frank wanted to be there that day. I mean, it may. Yeah. I'm not trying to be mean, but I mean, that's
you're right.
Reality, right.
And on a one-on-one, in a game of one-on-one, okay, I'm not certain that on this group I'm betting against Bruce Douglas, because you're not going to get an easy score against Bruce. He would rather he'd lay down his life before allowing somebody to get an open shot.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, he may not be able to score in his open shots.
Yeah, this is true.
But you're not going to have...
Dude, I'll tell you what, there's nobody who could back somebody down to the free throw line.
Oh, yeah.
And shoot that little turnaround jump shot like Bruce Douglas. That was just slowly, methodically. Yep. These other guys, Darren with the crossover, Frank would do a blow by and hit a tough floater or whatever. Derek Harper was so explosive. D would run by you. Bruce Douglas just kind of slowly back you down and just make a 15-foot jumper in your eye. Just so different.
Smooth. So fun. He was a smooth player.
Yeah, no, he was. Yeah, so we've been having kind of some fun. We thought we would do over the next few weeks. We'll go through the positions and talk about these and just reminisce. I know Illini fans, everybody has their opinion. Feel free to shoot them in there. I'm not certain.
And don't you think sometimes it's like a single season? Even if we're talking like a wing next year, if we do wings sometime, if you do single season, is there anybody who can match Terrence Shannon's season last year? Oh my.
Yeah.
That would be a guy that I would give a run for his money, but Terrence's numbers were too good. But if there was 2 wings, I would give Terrence a run for the money. And everybody knows I'm a Terrence Shannon fan, but his numbers are outstanding. But there's 2 guys I have to think of.
Maybe you go back. Kendall Gill had a great, whether it's Eddie Johnson. There's so many great guys, but I'm just saying my whole thing was just like, it's incredible, right? If you go 1 year, you could have a different than if a guy who played 4 years. So it depends on what you value in that time period.
Yeah. Terrence's 2 years made me wish it was 4.
Or
Yeah,
5. How
Yeah,
about
or
5?
5. Yeah, that's a good point. 5, just like Kofi's 3 should have been 5.
Well, no one would have any records at Illinois in rebounding and scoring and free
In
throw
Illinois,
attempts.
I mean, in terms of rebounding, I don't think nationally anybody would
I
have
know
any
he
records.
would have so many records if he would have stayed for 5 years. He'd have
Yeah,
about he'd have
and
made
who
about
knows the
$3
way the
million.
NBA's the way the NBA's changing a little bit, where the bigs, you don't necessarily have to be able to hit the 3 anymore. You just got to be able to roughly defend out there. Maybe
Yep.
Kofi could have finally made it. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, this has been fun. So we wanted to do this and give people an opportunity to reminisce a little bit on some of the past folks. We'll be doing more of these in the coming weeks because July is a quiet time out there for folks. I will say a couple things. It's interesting watching this jockeying for position that we're seeing amongst the teams with the SEC clearly wanting 5 conference champions, and then they want an at large where if they keep their in conference games down to 8, they'll be able to be pointing to strength of schedule and where everybody started and say we ought to get as many of these at large bids as possible. And with ESPN showing them and they're their prime product, I don't know if I was ACC or Big 12 if I'd feel real comfortable with that. Meanwhile, the Big 10 wants to go with the Big 10 and SEC each getting 4 automatic bids. I think that would be a better deal for some of those smaller conferences, but we'll see what happens. I don't know, Brad, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I it's all politics right now, trying to find the right fit to get the most so you make the most money and be seen the most, and it helps with recruiting. It's a cyclical. Yeah, I don't know. I think that if you want to say they should get X number of teams, I get it. Big Ten and SEC should get, maybe if you're going to have 16 teams eventually, if they get 4 each, okay, and then make it at large. But I think 9 conference games should be mandatory
Agree.
for you to get that bid. Or else, if you only do 8 conference games, then you only get 3.
Yeah,
From
that would
leagues.
change things quickly, wouldn't it?
They'd play a 9th one then, wouldn't they?
And I'll tell you what, look, I love college football. And if you give me another week of SEC matchups, that means there's probably 2 or 3 games that I'm going to want to watch. So selfishly, I would much rather have another conference game, just like I love how the Big Ten has 9 of them.
Yeah. Okay. So we get Alabama and Georgia instead of Alabama against Louisiana Monroe. You know what I mean? That's a totally different animal. And the other thing is, at the same time, you're making the Big Ten. That last week of the season, we got Ohio State playing Michigan. And on the other side, that last weekend, we got Eastern Illinois playing Alabama. Wait, what? Yeah, that's the reality. Right? So, I mean, here's Alabama's playing Louisiana Monroe, and they're playing Eastern Illinois, and Florida State's a good game. I'll give them that one.
Maybe you don't know. Florida
Not really.
State's one of those feast or famines.
But you get my point. Wouldn't it be better to have a quality game?
Yeah, Ked, you got any football thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know what? The 9-game conference game one should be standard. I agree with that. But what I feel bad for is that the Big Ten and SEC are bodying, which means by bullying everybody else. I mean, they really are, because they're the conference with the most money, and people are going to listen to them. And one of these conferences at some point, and it looks like to me, I don't know, I could be wrong. It looks like the SEC is 1, the Big Ten is 1A, because the SEC is, maybe I feel the way because they're more vocal about it. But this college playoff situation, nothing should be guaranteed. I mean, I'm just sorry. Now, a lot of people don't like the little man. Like a lot of people were upset that Indiana got in last year. They had a good year. I'm sorry, they really did. But giving people bids because of it from a conference, I'm not a fan of that. But I really and truly believe if you're going, the Big Ten doesn't run from people, number one. And I'm not saying that because I'm in Big Ten country. Basketball, football, baseball, they don't run from people. And I think Brad just mentioned Alabama's schedule. There's no way. At the end of the season, Michigan and Ohio State, you don't have to be a Big Ten fan. Everybody tunes in to that game. One, because of the media, because of the history behind it. They should be forced to have to play 9 games with better competition.
Doesn't Ole Miss, are we talking about Ole Miss? They want to be in the playoff. That's their goal, right? Here's their non-conference. Georgia State, Tulane, the Citadel, and Washington State, who used to be a high major. That's their non-conference schedule.
That's,
and then they got their
that's 4 wins. That's 4 wins.
But that's what I'm saying. It's not the same. Even if you're playing someone, even if Ohio State has to play a team like Indiana, who would we think, oh, that's an easy game, or Northwestern, you find out those aren't as easy, and those teams can still win, and so it's much tougher. Also, you get the wear and tear of having a physical game when you can physically dominate your opponent's different. So
that non-conference schedule that's awful. I'm sorry.
That's ass. It's
for
ass.
For a program like that, Illinois had that when they were struggling for years, and that's not good, man.
Yeah, and the other thing I see Texas Tech paying ungodly amounts of money, and if there is going to be a cap on what you can spend, they're going to be banking on the outside NIL deals, and you just have to wonder how legitimate these deals are going to be, or is it going to be a pure you can throw in as much money as you want. So I think there's a lot of let's see how all this plays out that's coming, because they could have, with one player, they may have spent almost a year's worth of NIL depending on how this rule gets enforced.
Have we ever seen, luckily, if they enter into these things for July 1, they were okay. So next year's going to be the interesting thing. Have we ever seen a market correct itself and lower prices and values and salaries? Have we ever seen that in the professional sports world? I don't think we really have. They just keep going up. So this is a new correction in college football and basketball. We're going to make it better. Oh, and I just don't know how that's going to work. Now, the one thing is the Big Ten has been the headliner here with their NIL Go, submitting everything through NIL Go and having this contract that all these guys get. And it's intriguing because let's say you're a football player and you're getting $100,000. You're getting $100,000. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
And you get an outside influence that wants to give you another $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. But the problem is that if you get in trouble for it and you violate your contract that you have, which says you won't go outside and do it illegally, you lose your $100,000. That's a pretty stiff penalty. And now, is somebody going to be able to enforce this? Is somebody going to watch it? We're going to have watchdogs? I don't, probably not effectively, but it is intriguing to see with this contract. Now, as one football recruit's parents told me, though, in the SEC, they don't even try to hide it.
Yeah.
It's true. They just don't. And they don't have that same contract. So it's a different world. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think it's fascinating to see how this is going to play out, because the one thing in human history is people will find a way to bend the rules and find a way to cheat no matter what the rules are.
If there's money, power, or influence on the line, they will do it.
Yes, they will do it, and they will.
All you do is just go to court now. Everybody.
I'm not saying everybody will do it, but eventually, I was talking to some former Illinois coaches who back in the day were totally against cheating and didn't feel like they're ethical and didn't want to break those rules. You ask them now, we should have just cheated, because why wouldn't we? Because now everybody else did.
And
so
you might be employed.
Yeah, you would still be there, right? So this is Bruce Weber would have 1,000 wins in Illinois, perhaps, or something crazy, or whatever it would be. I don't know how many years that. Maybe not that many, but 600 wins, or whatever, something 700 wins in Illinois. Because if you're bringing in, you would have maybe gotten Derrick Rose and Eric Gordon, and how good would that team have been?
Yeah, exactly. Illinois finally have that elusive title.
Yeah, it's just crazy. So you think about those things, maybe you should have just paid him. Who cares?
Yeah. And that point guard list would look different.
Else to pay him.
Derrick Rose of Illinois, that point guard list we just created would look a lot different.
It would, wouldn't it? It would look a little different. So
I tell you what, folks, we will certainly be back, and we'll have more of these here in the month of July as we're getting ready for football and the basketball season coming up. Until next time, folks.